my fellow ENFJ.
So welcome to Suzanne, Brue. We are recording now, and the 8 colors of fitness. Delighted for Suzanne to share this really interesting framework. So over to you, Suzanne.
Thanks, Suzanne. And, thank you everybody for being here. So this is going to be a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you coming here. So let me just kind of start off by talking a little bit about the background of this, and then I'm going to go into some more practical things. But let me so why the 8 colors? Whatever people say about physical exercise, that they don't have time, or there's not a good place, or all of they don't have the equipment, all of the reasons, it's really boredom. It's really boredom and lack of enjoyment. So that's really what I focused on, is how you can make physical activity more enjoyable. And so I'm just going to keep going right now and tell you a little bit about the story. I guess really this is going back almost 20 years ago. I'm an ENFJ. My mom is an ESFJ. And I was with her when she was working with a physical therapist, and he was being very vague. He wasn't assuring safety. He wasn't being showing my mom correct form. And even though, so my mom, as I said, is an ESFJ. This is a lifetime of instructions that she has given me, from locking the door in a very specific 2 up, 1 down way, to washing clothes. Everything had such specific instructions that I realized that this wasn't going to happen with the way he was presenting her. So I mentioned a few things, just like I said, to be more precise and work on correct form. And at that point, I really knew, because I'd been studying type for so many years, I really, in that kind of NI moment, I knew that I had something that I wanted to study for a long time, and that it just came as a flash. That was it. So then I spent the next 20 years working on this. So I want to tell you how I a little bit how I did this. This was the question: what keeps people in a physical activity program year after year while others drop out? And that was my question. So I worked and I interviewed people of the 16 types using these questions. And I interviewed people who had been working out for, let's say, a half hour plus a day for over 3 days a week for about a year, at least a year and a half. So I got people who were really regular exercisers. So I asked, what do you do for physical activity and exercise? One thing I stopped doing, because I used to ask what was typical, and I realized that was a very J kind of a thing to say, because I worked with enough ESFPs who said, what do you mean typical? So I ditched the word typical. Where do you prefer to exercise? What aspects of the environment are important? Do you prefer to exercise alone with others? And to describe that. What motivates you to exercise? Again, this was describing the benefits. What turns you off? And that was equally enlightening. What coaching styles work or don't work? And what advice would you give people of your type who do not exercise to help them? So these are the kind of questions that I worked with. And I got information from about 1,000 people, and enough to feel like I had a pretty good sample. I did this over 6 years. So when I wanted to make this popular, and I wanted to popularize this, I really wanted to take it outside of the type code, because even though the type code is very dear to us, other people do not, it doesn't resonate with other people. I wanted this to be accessible to the rest of the world. And I'm just going to say here, and in terms of the accessibility that this has had, I have, through the years, it's really been something widely used in insurance companies, the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida, which insures 6 million people. They have 12 health coaches that before COVID were presenting this to the people who subscribe to the benefit program at a certain level. I've been working with health coaches widely. It's widely used in health coaching programs. I've been working with YMCAs. I have now, there are about 40 YMCAs that are using this. Another 40 I am working with because they come in clusters. So it's really been a widely used and you know, it's the strength of type that really resonates with people. So that's really this is, it's fun to be working with a type professionals right now, because I'm very used to working with fitness coaches and with health coaches, and so this is fun. So this is, I want to say this came in an NI kind of vision. These colors came to me. So I will just show you the blues, the golds, blue and I'm going to I just want you to look at this first, and then the next slide will explain it a little bit better. But blues are ISJs, gold or ESJs, white INJ, purple ENJ, green ISP, red ESP, saffron INP, and silver ENP. So this will give you a better definition of how this works. So I've worked actually with a INFP designer to come up with these, and it took us a long time to do this, but there's a lot of detail in here. I just want to show you how these icons work. You look at the blues, these are ISJs. So you see the calendar, you see the dumbbells neatly stacked. You know, they do not like stray dumbbells. If we have any ISJs on the call, you do not like stray. Are there any? Okay. Gold. So I really found the perceiving processes were the most important aspects. And so I was able to, if I have to present this to, let's say, and when I just get down to 4, I can do this with the dominant perceiving processes. So there's blues, and then there are golds. And I put the gold there as the gold standard, the, you know, I1, it's the, you know, that aspect of doing it right and having a certain standard. So those are SJ types. ISFP, ISTP are greens, and that was really easy for me. I mean, greens are just, you know, nature is their nature. They just love being outdoors. I have had greens say to me, getting outdoors is the most important thing. What I do is secondary. I've never met a green who doesn't go to the top of a mountain. It's like, why would you climb unless you go to the top? So they tend to, green just seemed that color. Reds, that color of attention, competition, show, you know, loving to share what they do. And you can see the excitement, very excited, love the physically active world. So these are the sensing types on the top. And I will mention here, if just to be clear too, is that I had to get down to 8. So I took the thinking and the feeling out. I can put it back in at any time. In coaching styles, it's back in. But again, you just had to deal with 8. And that I found, although it's important, it's not as important as the dominant perceiving type aspects of people. Purple, look at us. I mean, you know, disciplined initiators, you know, plan what we're going to do and do it. Purples are very identity oriented. You know, they say things like, I wouldn't want to be the kind of person who didn't exercise. So there's a lot of identity with that. Whites, INFJs, INTJs, you got the cloud up there, you know, they're either very, very sensory involved or totally not sensory involved. So INJs can love to be with their thoughts in a peaceful environment. Saffrons were not as, that was the one color that didn't come to me because it's such an offbeat personality. and very, Catherine, you got that? Yes, they're just kind of, yeah. So I couldn't figure out what to do with INTPs and INFPs. And then I opened up my spice drawer and I said, that's it, Saffron. And so far, Saffron's really like it. And even say to me things like, well, other people understand it. And I said, as long as you do, that is all that's important. But I love that offbeat color of Saffrons. And then we've got silvers, ENFPs, ENTPs, love to walk, talk, be with other people. It's about being with people, and exercise is getting exercise along the way. So one of the things that has really resonated with people is being able to think of exercise as a job or play. And you all know what that means. People that, and here we've got the JP types. And when I have been at fitness conferences, that really, it's like, that really gets people. And that gives them like, okay, it's worth it just to know that. Because people that exercise as a job tend to like to plan, they like to keep track, they like to anticipate what they're doing. They don't have anything against fun, but fun is not what gets them out there. It's accomplishing what they set out to do. And the environment is important, but not as important as accomplishing what they set out to do. On the bottom, we have the play types, and they really want to have fun from the beginning. That fun is what inspires them, and they can figure out all these ways to have fun. They tend to be more open-ended, and they're more sensitive to the environment, just generally, like they can get really turned off by an environment. The convenience is really important there. This is where like they want to be able to start in outside of their house. Now, unless, and there are always these exceptions, but let's just say convenience is really important. And I mean, I remember a Saffron officiant said to me, okay, if I take my bike down from the garage, that's one step. But if the tire is flat, that's a game. That's a game breaker. So that was just my, so I think that job play is just so important. And I'm right now just gonna see if before I kind of go through these, I just want to see if anybody has any comments, any thoughts, please. I'm an extroverted field. I like to talk with people. Catherine.
I have a question. I noticed on the slide with all 8 images that the ESPs and the ENPs showed 2 people and the other 6 had just 1. Could you talk a little bit about that choice?
Yes. Okay, do we have any ENPs? Do we have any silvers or reds on this call? Any silvers? Any ENPs?
Yes,
Tell me that.
Sharon, one person is got a hand up. Sharon, do you want to say how that works for you?
Yes. So you're looking at a girl who's been dying during the pandemic because I normally go to the Y 7 days a week to go to classes to work out. I tried it alone. It's awful. Now that I'm vaccinated, I'm back at the Y 7 days a week with people working out always.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Any other comments here? Because that's it's always best from your words. So anybody else?
I'm not seeing any other hands up at the moment.
I think I see.
Oh yeah, Chris.
I've discovered that largely through Suzanne's book that the way for me to actually want to keep walking or keep doing anything is to do it with a friend where we can chat. So it's not the thing, it's not the activity that's the goal, it's the friendship.
Right.
And so now I'm walking 1 or 2 or 3 times a week. We've been allowed out with one friend to exercise for several months. So I've been doing one friend at a time. So I've been doing that and it's working really well. And I can do miles now that I couldn't do before.
Thank you, Chris. And I wanted just to say this too, as a, very often people will say, if you're an extrovert, you like to work out with other people. If you're an introvert, you like to work out by yourself. That is absolutely not something that I have found at all. Sometimes it works, but the big exception are INTPs and INFPs. They enjoy working out with somebody else if that person is right. If it's not right, if that person is going to be like a stickler for time, if they're going to get too regimented, it's going to go off. So they really like that one or two people or some people, but they don't rise to the icon of with somebody else, but like the reds and the and the golds would, but they really enjoy that one or two people that's right for them. And I just want to say here that, so let's say you've got the INTPs, INFPs who enjoy working out with others, that right person, that person moves out of town and it's awful, it'll take them years to find somebody else. But the ENTJs, ENFJs, they tend to, other people are in the environment are okay, but they don't search for other people. They're not looking for other people. They tend to, like, because they want to do it as a job, they want to get it done. They're not dependent on other people. So that's just
Molly,
The friend I walk with is an ISTJ.
okay. And
um,
she probably times it. Does she time it? She probably times it.
I do, but only to put in my fitness tracker.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's not a goal. It's just, oh, it's another number.
I had an INFP friend that I gave my old fitness tracker to, and it was compatible with the one I had. And since we couldn't walk together at times, I sent her a friend thing so we could keep track of each other. And then one day she unfriended me and I got really upset. And
Yeah.
then I asked her about it and she says, well, she felt like the fitness tracker was judging her. So she unfriended me and she stopped using
So
it.
funny.
So,
But I understand that because
Yeah.
it wasn't fun anymore. It just got too organized, and yeah.
and Molly Allen has been incredibly patient and has had her
Hi,
hand up for a
Molly.
while.
Hey.
So Molly, do you want to ask your
Hey
question?
there, Suzanne.
Hi there.
And I was surprised by activities of 3 women INFPs. They all love kickboxing,
Yes.
which was interesting. And 2 of them have raved. They go to a place in Maine and they take old equipment like computers and stuff like that. And there is a place where you walk in with a baseball bat and or a golf club or something like that, and you're in a soundproof room just beating things up. I was just intrigued by the choice of the INFP.
Okay, Molly, that makes perfect sense to me, because INFPs like things that are offbeat. They tend to really, and INTPs too, but let's just say INFPs really like to do, so there might be like roller dancing or, and I could see where it could be, kickboxing,
Yeah.
something like that. They are doing, they know the people that they're going with. They like the people. It's about the people and getting exercise along the way in some kind of a fun environment. So of any type that's the most bored with exercise, I think it's INTPs and INFPs. They have figured out how to make this fun for them. So they've just figured out how to make it fun, and they get exercise along the way. So, I mean, there's so many little tricks that people have done to make to exercise, because pure exercise is not interesting for most people. So people have done all these things to trick themselves. And I think they're like a really good example. I can't see an ENFJ doing that, but I can see an INFP doing that.
Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the blues, and then I'm just going to stay, if it's okay, I'm just going to stay with colors right now. So the blues and the golds, you see, these are introverted sensing in the dominant or auxiliary. tend to be past-based, follow advice from trusted sources. So routine-oriented, planful, motivated by completion, very safety conscious, very, very safety conscious. You know, you'd be surprised at how many people don't exercise because they don't think it's safe. A lot of people. And they want to track their progress. They want to track their progress in a way that is comfortable for them. I was working with an ISTJ woman, a Blue Bishop woman. She had all of her cards at the YMCA, which she loved, and she had them all organized. And the YMCA was renovating, and they ditched all of her cards. It was devastating. It was so horrible because she had her system that worked. It was a trusted system, and she was really upset about that. But there's a lot of, you know, correct form, tracking your progress. Do something that's worked in the past. Like, why would you? They tend to not do anything that has any kind of new agey, unproven way of exercising. Really loving the familiar. I was working with a gym chain in California, and finally, when one of the trainers understood, he was before annoyed why a Blue ISTJ, I'm just going to say Blue, that she'd come in, put her stuff down on the treadmill, the same treadmill every day, and then leave to go change. It was really annoying for him. And when he understood that familiarity with that equipment was what was keeping her going. I mean, that was, she might have been able to adjust to something else, but that was very important. So if she, you know, once she understood that was the reason for that. So, you know, what's worked in the past, this is where they will, like, let's say American Heart Association, British Heart Association, American Sports Medicine, things like they will go with trusted groups and you know, exercise because of that. Blues tend to be more self-contained. They are more motivated by the commitment that they made to themselves than by the exercise. So I just want you to think about that. They've made that commitment to themselves, and that is more motivating than the exercise. The goals, they enjoy having people in the environment, but not necessarily interacting with them. But they enjoy that, and they are energized by sharing their accomplishments with others. The Golds really love to call up and tell somebody what they just did. It's part of the experience. It really is. Like, I just, you know, I just walked 4 miles in 48 minutes. Like, they want to tell somebody, and it makes it really real for them. So, you know, like the Blues are not going to do this unless you ask them, but the Golds will readily tell somebody. Golds really are proud of their accomplishments and like to share that. So any comments there? Okay. I'm going to just keep going. Here's some comment. I like to get people's actual words. And in my first book, what I did was before writing the book, I went through all the interviews and pulled out like the 16 words that they used most frequently. So that was just kind of an interesting. So there's 16 words in each chapter that they, at the end of which people talk, that's part of their language. So here we go. I like exercise that can be measured. I jog and lift weights 3 times a week. I like to see that I did what I said I was going to do. I really prefer not to talk to anyone while exercising. Get the job done. Tried and true Blue. And we've got a version of SI, but an extra version. Decide what you're going to do and for how long, then plan to exercise on that schedule for at least a month. This is giving advice to other people. Decide that missing an exercise session is not an option. Find a time, set a goal, and just do it. I mean, you know, ESTJ, ESFJ, that's like all over there. You know, this is not an INFP talking, right? You know, so, you know, people have asked me, are there certain types that are more active than others? I really don't think so. And I've not measured that exactly, but my experience is that is not true. People find what works for them. And this has been a way, you know, one way of people finding it, but other, like, you know, your friends who were kickboxing and you know, in a cabin in New England. I mean, they found their way of doing that. So yeah, so that's just important to think, because a lot of times intuitive types might think that they're not as physically active as others, and that's really not true. But we can all get off for different reasons. If a blue has another obligation that's more important than exercise, they will do that. They will not exercise because something else is more important. So you get into that, you tap into that obligation and duty. Whites and purples. So this is a smaller percentage of the population. Build a program based upon your own vision. Both are routine oriented and planful. They classify exercise. They tend to, when you ask, if I ask a white or a purple, what do you do for exercise? So it's say, I do this for strength, I do this for cardio, and I do this for stretching. It's really interesting how they talk about categories, immediately talk about categories, and prefer to keep exercise and socializing separate. It can work out together, but I'm just saying they prefer, because these are job types, and enjoy physical activity as a time to reflect. Tend to very often do things that are not choreographed, you know, something that has a lot of repetition to it, like swimming or biking or walking, something that they can do in a familiar way, familiar paths, and just let their mind go, just kind of not pay too much attention. They tend to be very, worst clients for health coaches. I want to tell you this. I've worked with a lot of health coaches, and they say to me, like, why do people sign up, you know, like these whites and purples, they sign up for a program and then they don't do anything I say. So for any NIs on the call, you know, that really resonates with me, because as I've said, you know, well, they're operating out of your vision, and you're just out of their vision, which is pretty deep, and you're giving advice, and if it's not compatible with their vision, you're going to do what they want to do, but we're not great clients. Yes. Hi, Chris.
The coaches you're referring to, I know with some people, they have the attitude of, well, if you are not going to do what I tell you, why have you asked for my advice?
Right.
When some people take all the information they can get and synthesize it and make up their own mind. So
yeah, no,
a coach type as well.
Yeah, and I think so. You know, I have worked with health coaches. And the real, you know, people, let's say they work with the 8 colors and they know it and they understand it, and it really helps them. It helps them a lot. It's just that the whites and the purples have the biggest dropout rate. They just do. They drop out more because they're doing something. They want to do it, you know, their own way. And it's just the way it is. I mean, it's just, it can be both. I mean, because I think that really, I would say health coaches, and I'm going to just say this, health coaches generally, and I'm just talking about percentages, a big variety there, tend to be a lot of more SJ types, and personal trainers tend to be more SP. It's just generally. So I think very often for SJ types who find it so easy to follow the rules, it's just a real stretch for them to understand this. They do, and then they, you know, but you know, we have a default, and it's, yeah. Any other comments? So you know, the whites are more self-contained. They're the ones that talk the most about peaceful environments. That's a language that they use a lot. The white canvas, and I chose white because it's just like they can just paint. You could go from nothing and they can paint whatever they want there, because there's this sort of like a nothingness that you really like to get with that. You know, NI is that first function. I like activity that allows me to work independently but not alone. I like to be where people are but not forced to interact with them. For me, it's important to get away from home, from work, and treat exercise as a little vacation from the stress of life. The planful purples, ENTJs, ENFJs, I like to enjoy life and feel good about myself, which includes being in shape. I loosely envision my exercise week ahead of time. I run, walk, and bike outdoors. I use the elliptical machine. A lot of planning here. More importantly, I really like to be with my inner monologue while exercising. So, these are purples, ENTJs and ENFJs have a strong identity, and exercise is part of their identity. So very often they will say, I wouldn't feel right about myself unless I exercise. That comes up a frequent comment where, other types, it's not an identity thing. But so I'm just going to keep going. And so, these greens and reds are just great. They're just fantastic. They really love the physical active world. They love being outside. They like the spontaneous, to be opportunistic. They are being outdoors is very energizing for them. They notice all the details in nature. They love that physically active lifestyle. They're very present, very in the moment. As you see, the difference is the greens are more self-contained. They want to really be by themselves, so that they never get lost in nature. They always seem to know where they are. And they're sort of like they have a natural GPS to them. I was working with somebody who, I interviewed him. He was training for a climb to Mount Denali, and he did it in the most minimalist way. Like he would, let's say greens tend not to like gyms. They feel like too mechanistic and they don't like all the equipment, but he did it for a purpose. So he would get on a Stairmaster and he had a backpack and he would just load it with rocks, and he'd keep adding rocks and making the incline higher. So, he used a gym for a particular reason, but he did it in the most minimalist way. Reds, they love to be where the action is. They love the physically active world. They must have a goal. And many reds that I can't do it unless I have a goal. My brother is a red. My brother was a professional basketball player and had a really interesting experience with him. I mean, that he was in, they love an audience. Reds really love audiences. So and I remember him saying to me, sports were, athletes are performers, and it's just, this is a very red, very ESP, I think, kind of a comment. So I was with him when he was working with a physical therapist, and I was in the hospital with him, and he was going to the physical therapist. And I said to him, well, I'll meet you afterwards. He said, no, come with me, come watch. And it was like, there's an aspect of that very, connection, wanting to be with other people, wanting to, the music, the activity around. And I've worked with I know of a physical therapist who helped reds, with their routine activities by encouraging them to have music and have people around them while they're doing their exercise. The compliance for physical therapists, the compliance for at-home exercise is so low. It's like maybe 30%. So a lot of them use the 8 colors to help them get into the environment, to help people set up an environment that they're going to be more successful in, because whether it's music or other people or doing the exercises with privacy or people around you or certain times a day. So this has been pretty popular with many physical therapists. The greens, I like the idea of being fit, but I don't make time for it unless it's a connection with a practical activity or if it's outdoors. I mean, greens have they're very low gym users, really low. It's too mechanistic in there. You see here, repetitive exercise in a gym is hard to confront. I'm happiest when being active in nature. I'm never bored outdoors, frequently bored indoors. I just recently, these things come to mind as I'm presenting too. I was recently, I'm working with a group of YMCAs in Orlando, Florida, and they're using the 8 colors for onboarding new members. So there was a green that was a trainer, and he was saying what he would do to onboard a new member. He would show them the private places in a gym, the times that people are not going to be there, and ways that they can be outside. So they're now like using it to onboard, and it's really good to have a staff that's filled with a variety of personalities so they can help with the onboarding process. So that's been a good use of the 8 colors certainly for fitness centers. I love, reds are just so sweet. They're so much fun. Yesterday I planned to work in the garden, but a friend called and said, let's go kayaking. So off we went to the lake with our kayaks and our dogs in tow. For me, there's no such thing as an exercise routine. I keep things in my car, so I'm ready for action. So do we have any reds? I think we have a red on the call on this class. I think if I get out.
Nicholas, do you want to contribute?
Nicholas,
Go
I
for it.
want to ask you.
It's so embarrassing.
Okay, Nicholas, I just have to ask you, what's in your trunk?
Sorry?
What's in your trunk? I mean, I really find that reds are always ready. And so would you tell us?
I've got a yoga ball here, which I sit on sometimes.
Yeah.
I have this as well.
I can't see. I'm sorry. Let me just find you.
Stretch my muscles.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, you've got, those are great, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm always ready. I'm literally always primed to do some sort of exercise. I run marathons, I cycle, I swim. And yeah, the more people watching me, the better. That's what really gets me going. It's very true. We really get energized by having an audience.
By having what?
Having an audience is really,
yes.
It's really energizing. So, but equally goals as well. So I typically won't run for less than an hour. Usually 2 hours is what I do.
How do you train for a marathon?
Not a huge. I'm always physically active. So when I've run about 8 marathons, I think.
Yeah.
And I did practice a bit for it, but not a huge amount. It was quite a spontaneous decision to run a marathon. I just did it.
So you're just in the kind of shape where you could just do a marathon.
Yeah.
You just maintain that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay,
ever since I was a child, I've always been physically active.
And so I think this is a really interesting thing because reds, in order to be spontaneous, you have to plan. I mean, it's a little bit of a trick. So you have to have all these things at the ready in order to be able to participate when the opportunity comes up. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what I do is I won't have if I go running, so I live in London, so if I run where I live in London, it's central London, it might take an hour and a half, and I'll take different routes every day to get to where I need to get to. So I'll just leave the house and I'll make a decision when I'm running which route I'm going to take. I don't really plan it.
Yeah. So that's a very different, I mean, if we have any ISJs, any blues on the call on this, I mean, can you imagine leaving the house and not really knowing which route you're going to take?
I don't think we've got any ISTJs or ISFJs on the call.
Then we'll go with the INTJ.
Yeah.
ENT.
Tim Marsden, if he's here, is ISTJ.
Yeah, I'm not seeing him.
Okay. But I, think my brother, as I said, was a professional basketball player. He always had a basketball in the trunk because if he was driving and saw a basketball court or saw a game, he had to, he just wouldn't miss that. So, there's some planning. If you're going to be spontaneous, you have to keep your gear at the ready too. So very often, I lived in Vermont for years and people just, skiers lived on the mountain, and I remember interviewing somebody, a Red Harmony ESFP, and she said, I've just always happened to live on the mountain, so there's a lot of convenience that people that you're not conscious of, but just build into your life if you want to be physically active and spontaneous. So thanks for sharing that. And yeah.
I can vouch as an SI user. Sometimes I spend more time planning than actually doing the activity.
So what are your preferences?
INFP, but I have
Okay.
I can vouch as an SI user that that I could spend more time planning than actually doing something. And in terms of an audience, like I find with S things, I'm very self-conscious. So unless my SI is perfect, I do not want an audience at all.
And SI is very attuned to form.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you know, once I got really, you know, was learning all this, I you know, would talk to SI types, and they would just like really reveal how annoying it was to see people do things in bad form. Like it just really, you know, the quote was, it drove them crazy, you know, even like to see small things like how people would be, you know, stapling pads of paper. Just there was a correct way to do it.
It could be overwhelming because each activity, there's like, you can watch YouTube videos for hours about like the 15 different ways to do your form properly or not properly. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's see where, oh, so here we go. We probably have a lot of saffrons and silvers. So, you know, these are spontaneous and opportunistic, but in a different kind of way. The idea of pure exercise is unappealing. They really have to have as many layers going on as possible, you know, whether they're outside with a friend, it's spontaneous. They build up, especially silver harmonies, ENFPs, they build up so much accountability with other people that they just have to show up, because there's always a desire not to show up for ENFPs. They enjoy interacting with people in the environment. Convenience is a priority. I want to say here, there's a big difference with the saffrons and the silvers. Silvers will like to have, they'll be happy exercising with anybody because they just want that stimulation. Saffrons are much more particular about who they're going to be exercising with. So, you know, if something gets too restricted, too organized, too structured, it'll fall out. So saffrons, and I think I said very early in the call that saffrons, if, you know, they'll find their workout buddy and then their workout buddy will have left town, will have moved, and it might take them years to find somebody else, because it's just a certain exquisite aspect of that it's just got to work for them. But convenience is really, really important. With the saffrons and silvers, I would say do not check your email on the way out of the house, because you will find many things that are more interesting than exercising. So just go. I have often advised silvers particularly to go to the gym dressed and ready to work out, because if they go into the locker room, they might not come out. They'll start talking, and that could be that could, you know, their time, they've just used up their time. Saffrons tend to be more self-contained. Silvers, they just train with a group. They are just really energized by conversation. They like to walk and talk and run alongside people and talk the whole time. They really enjoy that. That just keeps them going. So any silvers here that are saffrons that want to comment about how it works for you guys? How many layers? How about the accountability for silvers? You know, how do you create accountability so that, you know, like, you know yourself that you might not show up?
So Sharon,
Yeah.
you've got your hand up there.
I do. So yeah, I've always been a hardcore exerciser, used to teach aerobics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But my cousin, before she died, she said, I want you to take yoga. And I said, okay. I mean, you can't deny somebody on their deathbed. I mean, honestly. So after she passed away, I mean, she knew what she was doing. I went to yoga and I was thinking, this is stupid. It's so quiet. It's just crazy poses, the words, everything. I hated it. And then I finally settled into it. And then I finally started enjoying the process. But I'm telling you, I would have never gone had she not. I mean, she knew
Right.
what she was an INFJ, so she knew exactly what she was doing. But it was one of the best things that ever happened, honestly. And then now, obviously, I found a yoga instructor that I befriended, and now I show up for her, and yada yada yada.
You know, so I think what you're saying, you show up for her, which I think is a big, that F, it keeps you going, but there's so many layers in yoga. There's so many things that, you know, there's the whole mind body aspect of yoga. There's the people part of it. There's, you know, you found, you know, she knew, and then you found what your hook was there. But I want to, maybe this is a good time to say too, and I can go through the activity, but people say, well, what should I do, you know, for exercise? Like I'm a you know, a Blue or something. And whatever you do it in a type specific way. Like if you're a Blue, you want to keep track, you want to plan. Let's say if you're going to go for a walk, it's a very different kind of walk than if you're a Silver or a Saffron or a Red. I mean, people, you know, you just go about it differently. Like I was talking to some friends of mine who are married. He's an INFJ and she's an INFP, and they go for a walk together. He times it, she doesn't. They probably have very low conversation. But you know, like if, for instance, you were talking about yoga, I mean, the hook for you is the teacher, perhaps, and you probably, you know, the mind body aspect to it. I remember working with a Silver Efficient, and for her, it's, you know, she had a whole deck of yoga schedules. This is a while ago, of schedules in her wallet, and she was just going to keep her you know, her clothes in the gym, and then if she had a time in her schedule, she was just going to do it, because she's not so concerned about the teacher. It's really what she can slip in. So, you know, there's so many tricks, and that are important for people to sort of, you know, understand how their type will benefit and will make exercise more enjoyable and easier to do. So here we go. You know, again, this kind of distraction, I have to distract or entertain myself. It's got to be fun. I would say fun comes up the most for the Saffrons and the Silvers. I can't imagine anything more dreadful than exercising in a lockstep platoon with the drill sergeant barking commands. It doesn't work to get pitted against someone else. Pleasure in the activity is a much better motivator. This was an INFP. Does that sound, Chris, does that sound like a Saffron to you?
Yes, though I do like what this Quicksilver says.
Okay. The easiest thing for me to do is walking and talking with someone else. The time goes by quickly. I don't even think of it as exercise. There's no resistance to overcome.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Yeah.
You're both
Right.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. So looking at something, so I just put this up, which is just, is there a hand? Hello there.
Yeah, that was me, Suzanne. I'm INTP, so I was just going to comment. Could you just go back to your previous slide?
Sure.
I mean, I think the bits that resonate with me are, I like variety. I don't like having to do exactly the same thing. So I do yoga, I do Pilates, I play tennis, and I cycle.
Yeah.
I mean, tennis is my favorite, and but I don't think your presentation is really covering those sort of team sports, that side of things.
Tell me how you play tennis. How does it come about? I mean, who do you play tennis with? Where do you play tennis?
I belong to a club.
Yeah.
So I either go along to the social sessions. I mean, obviously in lockdown, it's been a bit different, but in normal circumstances, we have social sessions where you just mix in and play with anybody. And I also play in matches. I mean, I'm quite competitive, so I like the match side of it. But I really like, you know, I like being out of doors. So for me, exercise, I really like the stuff where I'm out of doors. So that's another reason why I cycle. So during lockdown, I went out for a bike ride every day because that was out of doors. I don't particularly like gyms. I do go to a gym sometimes, but I like the yoga. One of the things I like about yoga and Pilates, and they are obviously more solitary things, but it's, I couldn't do those classes if the teacher did the same every time. Luckily, the teacher that I go to for these, and I've been doing them online during lockdown, she does different things every week. It's not the same. But the other comment I was going to make was when I've had periods where I've been swimming, for example, or I used to do a bit of running.
Yeah.
For me, running is dead boring. But so the only way I could carry on running was where my mind goes somewhere else. And I know I'm going to do it. I just go without thinking, do I want to do it? So I just go, and then I can keep going as long as my mind is somewhere completely different than the running.
Do you play music? Do you, Saffron's
No.
music is big. You don't play music. Some people do.
No.
Okay, a lot of people do.
No.
But everything that you were saying had to do with variety and fun.
Yeah.
Too. And you said like tennis, there's a lot of variety and there's a lot of spontaneity in it. Like you just sign up for something and whoever shows up is fine. So there's
Absolutely, yeah.
what you're doing. You're playing tennis as a Saffron.
Yeah, that's right. Are you right? And I mean, one of the reasons why I like going along to the social sessions is that you can turn up at any time. I don't have to be committed to a certain time. I can just go along and join in. So I really like that.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that. It's really a good distinction too, to do that. Yeah. Nathan.
I had a question. Earlier you said that there are less greens and reds typically in a gym. I was wondering, have you identified like one or two colors where there'd be an influx of them in a gym?
So the only time that's really gotten measured, I was working with the gym chain in California where they were just really serious about measuring, and they found that true to the population, there were more like it was 40% golds and blues. So I haven't measured it's in that way, but I've just talked to enough people to know that gyms are just too mechanistic for most of the play time. I mean, they'll do it, but certainly the reds and the greens. I mean, if they want it for socializing, like let's say a red would be, would want to socialize with people, meet somebody at the gym, that would be more likely. But I mean, the greens just don't. They just won't. And I just remember an interview really well where I was talking to this Green Harmony ISFP who was a stunt man in California, and I was in Vermont. We were talking, and there were two things that conversation just really stood out. He said there was nothing for him. There was nothing worse than people calling him up to schedule a time to work out at a gym. Like everything about that was just horrible. Just that it just went against everything that was going to work out for him, like scheduling in a gym, competing with other people. But then he said something, this was where I was really understanding how important it was to be outside for greens. And I started to notice that they keep building decks in their house. They do as much as they can to bring the outside in. So, there's a lot of like waterfalls in their houses and then they porches and decks. So I remember saying to this guy after about an hour interview, and I said to him, I said, are you by chance sitting on a deck? And he said, do you think I'd be talking to you for an hour if I was inside? So he said, of course I'm outside. It was just a really neat moment just to understand. So I think that being called to nature and the physical world, and the reason I chose green is they just tend to merge with the outdoors. They notice so much. I mean, if you think about what a green is noticing, why would you want to be inside? And this particular person, I do remember that he said he couldn't find his way out of a parking garage because it was so ugly, but he knows every leaf that's outside. So just, yeah. I just went on, but that's okay. Here we go. How about strength training? I mean, that's a component. So let's just have a little bit of a look at that. So, again, we get in those blues and golds, very proper form, safety. I mean, they will be complaining, if you've been in gyms where like these dumbbells are strewn around, that is just going to be like, that is not going to work for blue or gold. They like to record and proven programs. This is not going to, I'll try this because somebody told me. No, it's going to be what a proven, some program that is proven and shown to be effective. That's what they're going to be doing. It's not going to be just like, here I'm just looking at some notes. And I know we're getting close to time. Whites will tend to research a program and create their own. They are methodical about addressing each muscle group. They tend to be, there's more of a methodical way that they will be working. I'm not saying that blues and golds don't, but this is something that came out a lot with the whites and purples. They tend to like a very organized, a very peaceful environment. They tend to like to challenge themselves, keeping track very loosely, but keeping track. And, but I would say the biggest thing, they will research their own program and create one that will work for them. And that comes from that NI. Reds and greens, they create, like, they want to be outside. I talked to actually I remember a green football player. He's got a whole obstacle course with a bunch of old tires outside and ropes and, a lot of minimalists, making it with nature, doing it with, objects of nature. And they compete for better performance. That's really, performance is big. The saffrons and the silver, they tend to like interesting and sociable environments. Music is really important to them, especially the saffrons. It really is very, very important. INTPs will say they wouldn't be able to exercise if they weren't listening to music. Music gets them over. And they want to be able, with the saffrons and silvers, to easily slip it into their day, to make it easy to happen, make it convenient. So, these are just, I guess we're getting to time, but I just wanted just to say a little bit about what I've done. I wrote, my first book was on, it was a compilation of my research. Then I started working with more trainers and I developed a workbook. And then I have a very cut to the chase guidebook, really very infographic, very rich and just very bulleted. So that's kind of what I've been doing, and wanted to share. I think it's there's not a program about a healthy lifestyle that doesn't include physical activity. And so if you make it more fun and closer to your preferences, and many people be out of their comfort zone. So if they get into their comfort zone with type, then they can make it more enjoyable. So any other thoughts, questions? Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. It's so good. It really it brings type to life, to see it actually show up in exercise like this. I guess a few comments. You mentioned that INTPs do quirky activities like ultimate frisbee. Well, I
Yeah, ultimate frisbee is a riot. Thank you for bringing that. They love that. Yeah.
But I also do kayaking. And yeah, the greens and the reds show up a lot there, but all of the different groups show up, but in different ways. And I've got a brother who's a blue, and he always wants to go back to the same river and on the same stretch. And
yes,
my green and red buddies don't. They're like, no, we're going somewhere else. We're going somewhere else. And it's terrible on my brother. He can't come with us because it's always fresh and new, and it's anxiety producing. So I guess those are just some of my comments.
Well, I think that's great, because you say something like kayaking, people do it their own way. People, like if an ISJ wants to do it in a comfortable way, go back to something that they know really well.
Yeah, and one of the things I do is multi-days. So you pack your sleeping bag and your tent and your kayak, and you go down the river, and you just spend a week or 2 weeks out. And the greens, boy, they're just in their element whole entire time.
Love it. Yeah.
Fantastic.
It. Well, they're very comfortable because they don't worry about getting lost either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're very oriented, and boy, like if something goes wrong, as it sometimes does, you want those greens, boy. They're like out there with the throw rope, and they're like climbing up on a jumble of logs to get stuff off, and I'm back there just thinking like, what would I do to solve this? And they're just They're just on it in the moment. It's
So
good buddies to have with you.
absolutely, absolutely.
So thank you so much, Suzanne. What I'll do is I'll pause recording now. If you